You're standing over it right now, that plant you love, leaves drooping, edges going crisp, maybe a yellow creeping in from the bottom. And here's the part that's driving you crazy. You've been watering it faithfully every single day or close to it, and it's still dying in front of you. So you think you're doing something wrong. Too much water, too little sun, some pests you can't see. But what if I told you the water you're giving it never actually reaches the roots? What if your plant is dying of thirst while sitting in soil you just watered 10 minutes ago? That's the real answer, and almost nobody talks about it. I know because I nearly killed a plant I'd grown for 6 years this exact way. Watered it every morning, watched it wilt every afternoon, and I guessed wrong for 3 whole weeks. By the end of this, you're going to be able to diagnose your own plant the way the Royal Horticultural Society describes it, using a rescue method English gardeners have quietly used since the 1800s. And this works whether your plant is a brand new seedling or something big and established you've nurtured for years, especially the old ones. So let's figure out together what's really happening. Let me take you back to that spring. I had a plant on my back step, a big leafy thing in a terracotta pot, and it had been thriving for years. Then one week it started to sag, not overnight, slow. The leaves lost that shine they had, the tips curled down like they were tired. And my first thought was the same thought you probably had. I thought I wasn't watering enough, so I watered more. Morning and evening. I emptied the can into that pot until I saw water run out the bottom and pool on the paving stones, and it kept getting worse. So then I flipped completely. I thought, no, I've drowned it. I've given it root rot. I pulled back and watered almost nothing for 4 days. And it got worse again, faster. That's the trap. That's the exact trap I want to pull you out of before you lose weeks the way I did. Because when you're watching something you love decline, you swing between the two obvious answers. Too much water, too little water. And both of those guesses can be dead wrong at the same time. So let's rule out the obvious first, because that's how you diagnose anything properly. You eliminate the loud, easy answers before you get to the quiet, true one. Overwatering, real root rot. It has a very specific look, and I want you to check your plant for it right now. Root rot smells. When you tip a rotting plant out of its pot or dig near its base, you get a sour, swampy, almost sewage smell. The roots don't look white and firm. They go brown and mushy, and they slip off between your fingers like wet thread. The soil stays soggy for days and never seems to dry. If that's what you've got, that's a different video, and you'd know it by the smell. But here's what I want you to notice. Most of you watching, your soil is not staying soggy. Your problem is the opposite. You water, and by the next day, the surface is dry and crusty again. You water, and the plant perks up for an hour, then flops back down by afternoon. You water, and somehow the pot feels light when you lift it. That is not too much water. That is water that isn't going where it needs to go. And that was my plant, exactly. The top looked wet, the paving under the pot was wet, but something wasn't adding up, and it took me far too long to see it. So, if the obvious answer is wrong, we have to ask the real question. Where is all that water actually going? Here's the clue that cracked it for me, and I want you to test this on your own plant the moment we're done. I took my watering can and I poured slowly, watching, and the water didn't sink in. It sat on top for a second, then it found the little gap between the soil and the edge of the pot, and it ran straight down that gap and out the drainage hole. In seconds, the whole root ball in the middle, where the roots actually live, stayed bone dry. I had been watering the sides of the pot for 3 weeks. I had never once watered the plant. This has a name, and once you know it, you'll never misread it again. It's called hydrophobic soil, or soil water repellency. And the Royal Horticultural Society has written about it plainly. When soil or potting compost dries out past a certain point, it changes. It stops absorbing water and starts repelling it. Think about it like a dry kitchen sponge. When a sponge is damp, it soaks up a spill instantly. But let a sponge go completely hard and dry, and pour water on it, and the water beads up and rolls right off. You have to soak that sponge slowly to bring it back to life. Your plant soil does the exact same thing. Why does it happen? The soil particles, especially in peat-based and core-based composts, develop a waxy, water-hating coating as they dry. Organic matter breaks down and leaves behind these fatty, resin-like substances that literally push water away. Scientists at several university extension services have documented this in both potting mixes and garden beds. It's real, it's measurable, and it's shockingly common. And here's the cruel part: the drier it gets, the worse the repelling becomes. So the plant starts to struggle. You respond by watering. The water runs off. The plant struggles more. You water more. More runs off. You are locked in a loop where your care is doing nothing, and every day you feel more helpless. That's the loop I was in. And I bet if you go pour a slow cup of water on your plant right now and watch it, you'll see the same thing. Either the water runs down the sides and straight out, or in a garden bed, it beads up and rolls away across the surface and disappears somewhere 3 feet from the plant. So we found the first real clue: the water is escaping. But knowing that raises a bigger, scarier question. If the soil is repelling water, how deep does the dryness go? Because that changes everything about how you save it. Let me show you how to find out, because this is where most people, including the old me, make their final fatal mistake. You'd think you could just check by feeling the top of the soil. You cannot. The top inch lies to you. In a repellent pot, the surface can feel cool and even a little damp from your last watering, while the entire core is dust. I want you to get a wooden chopstick, or a thin bamboo cane, or even a pencil, and push it slowly all the way down into the pot, right near the center where the roots are. Then pull it out and look at it, and feel it. If it comes out clean and dry the whole length, with maybe a little dark ring only right at the very top, your root ball is bone dry inside. That dry core is what's killing your plant. The roots in the middle, the important ones, the anchor roots, have had nothing to drink for days or weeks while you watered the outside. I did this test on my terracotta pot, and the chopstick came out completely dry. All the way down, powder clinging to it like flour. 6 years of growth, and the heart of it hadn't had a real drink in nearly a month, even though I'd poured gallons over it. I sat down on the step. I felt sick, honestly, because I finally understood that everything I'd been doing to help had been feeding the problem. But that feeling, that sick feeling, is exactly where hope starts. Because now you know the enemy. And the enemy is not a disease you can't cure. It's not a pest you can't reach. It's just dry soil that forgot how to drink. And dry soil can be taught to drink again. That's the good news I wish someone had handed me that afternoon. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking right now, and I want to speak to you directly. You're thinking, that's fine for a little pot, but my plant is huge. It's been in the ground for 8 years. It's a shrub, or a big established perennial, or a rose I planted when we moved in. You're thinking it's too big to soak, too far gone, too rooted to save. This next part is for you specifically. The ones with the old, beloved, established plants that are showing damage right now. Because you do not have to dig it up, and you absolutely do not have to start over. There's a way to bring the water back to the roots of a mature plant right where it stands, and I learned it the hard way after nearly giving up on plants I'd had for a decade. Here's the thing about a big established plant in the ground. Its soil goes hydrophobic too, especially in the top layer where feeder roots live, and especially after a dry spell or a hot stretch of summer. You water the bed, it looks watered. But that waxy repellent layer sheds the water sideways and it runs off to the lowest point, and your plant's crown stays dry as bone underneath. So here's what I do to rescue an established plant in place. First, I take a garden fork and I push it into the soil around the plant, out near the edge of the leaf canopy, not right against the stem. I push it in and rock it gently, just to open up channels. I do this every 8 inches or so all the way around, in a ring. I'm not trying to dig anything up. I'm just breaking that sealed, repellent crust so water has a door to get in. Then I water slow and low. Not a blast from the hose that runs off in 2 seconds. I set the hose to a trickle and lay it right at the base and let it dribble for 20 or 30 minutes so the water has time to soak down through those fork holes instead of running away. If you've got a watering can, you do it in stages. Pour a little, wait 5 minutes, let it sink, pour a little more. You're retraining that soil to accept water, one patient round at a time. And here's the trick that makes the whole thing work. The one the Royal Horticultural Society actually recommends for water-repellent soil. You add a wetting agent. Now that sounds like something you'd have to buy in a fancy bottle, but the traditional version is sitting in your kitchen. A single drop, just one drop, of plain washing up liquid in a full watering can of water, not more. One drop breaks the surface tension and strips that waxy coating off the soil particles so the water can finally cling and soak in instead of beating off. I did this around a shrub I was certain was finished. Fork the ring, one drop of washing up liquid in the can, slow soaks over 3 evenings in a row. Within a week, the new growth stopped wilting in the afternoon. Within 2 weeks, it was holding firm all day. I hadn't fed it. I hadn't sprayed it. I'd simply gotten water back to roots that had been begging for it. So if your big old plant is drooping and you thought it was too late, I need you to hear me. It is very likely just thirsty at the core, and thirst is the most fixable thing in all of gardening. You are not starting over. You are turning the water back on. That's the feeling I want to hand to you, and if you want to go even deeper into reading your plants this way, I've put everything I know into a resource that walks you through the whole system. It's called the Full Bloom System, and it's the complete framework I use to diagnose, rescue, and sustain every plant in my garden from the newest seedling all the way through to decades-old established plants. It covers the early warning signs in first bloom, builds your soil and root knowledge in deep roots, and brings it all together in a way that means you stop guessing for good. It's $67, and you'll find the link in the description below. But right now, let's keep going because there's a deeper layer to this that changes everything. But there's a deeper layer to this, and it's the layer that separates a plant that recovers for a week and then relapses from a plant that comes all the way back. Because getting water in once is not the same as keeping it there. And this is where the real mystery finally opens up. Here's what happened to me after that first rescue. My established shrub bounced back. I was thrilled. And then, about 10 days later, it started to sag again. Same drooping. Same crisp edges creeping in. And I nearly tore my hair out because I thought I'd solved it. That relapse is the clue almost everyone misses. It's the clue that finally led me to the real answer, the one buried under all the surface advice about watering more or watering less. Because here is the question nobody was answering. If the soil is repelling water, why does re-wetting it once not fix it for good? Why does it dry out and reject water again so fast? And the answer is that the repellent layer doesn't disappear just because you got water past it one time. As soon as that soil dries out again, even a little, the waxy coating reasserts itself and you're right back to water running off. A quick surface splash the next morning does nothing. It sits on top, it runs away, and the core starts drying from the inside out all over again. You're bailing out a boat with a hole still in the bottom. I want to talk about what you actually stand to lose here, because I don't think most people grasp it until it's too late, and I nearly learned it the worst way. It is not just this one plant, though that would be bad enough. When the core root ball of an established plant dries out repeatedly, the fine feeder roots die back. Those are the roots that take up almost all the water and nutrients. A plant can limp along on its thick anchor roots for a surprisingly long time, looking sad but alive, while its whole feeding system quietly collapses underground. And then one hot week in July or August, when it needs those feeder roots most, there aren't enough left. And it goes from drooping to dead in a matter of days, and everyone says the heat killed it. The heat didn't kill it. The dry, repellent core killed the feeder roots months earlier, and the heat just delivered the final bill. That's a plant you've had for 10 years, gone in a week. Over something that was fixable the whole time, if only someone had told you what you're about to hear. So the real fix isn't a single dramatic rescue. It's understanding that hydrophobic soil needs to be fully, deeply re-wetted all the way through, and then kept from ever going bone dry again. And that brings us to the method that finally solved it for me completely. The one I promised you at the start, the old English trick that fixes this at the root, permanently, in a single afternoon. Let me tell you where I found it, because that matters. I'd been reading everything, the forums, the modern guides, and they all circled the same shallow advice. Water more, water less, check drainage. Then I went digging into older material, heritage gardening manuals, the plunge bed. And I found this practice that Victorian gardeners used routinely in the 1800s, and that the Royal Horticultural Society still describes today for pots and containers that have dried out completely. It had been sitting there the whole time, quietly kept alive by patient, old-school growers, while the rest of us guessed and lost plants. It's called the plunge, or the full soak, and here it is. For a plant in a pot, you don't water from the top at all. top watering is exactly what fails, because the water just finds the gap and runs off. Instead, you fill a bucket, or a sink, or a basin, or even the bathtub for a big one, with water. Then you lower the entire pot into it, so the water level sits above the surface of the soil, right up to the rim, and you leave it there. At first, you'll see it: bubbles, a steady stream of air bubbles rising up out of the compost as the water finally forces its way into all those dry, air-filled pockets in the core. That's the sound of your plant drinking for the first time in weeks. You leave the pot submerged until the bubbles completely stop, which for a badly dried root ball can take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes a full hour. When the bubbles stop, the entire root ball is saturated, top to bottom, center and all. Not the outside, all of it. Then you lift it out and let it drain. And that is a plant that has genuinely, truly been watered, most likely for the first time since it started to decline. I did this with my terracotta plant, the one I'd nearly given up on. I put a drop of washing up liquid in the water first, exactly as the Royal Horticultural Society suggests, to break that waxy repellency. I lowered the pot in, and the bubbles came up for almost 40 minutes. 40 minutes of air escaping soil I had believed was wet. I actually laughed because it was so obvious once I could see it. That plant recovered and never relapsed. Because this time the water didn't just skim the sides. It filled the whole sponge. And for those of you with plants in the ground that are too big to lift, the plunge principle still saves you. You just apply it in place. This is the version I want you to do this weekend. You take that garden fork and open your ring of holes around the plant, out at the canopy edge, like I described. Then instead of a quick water, you do a deep, slow, repeated soak with a drop of washing up liquid in the can, and you come back and do it again a few hours later, and again the next day, until the ground stays visibly dark and damp several inches down when you push your chopstick in. You are recreating the plunge, forcing full saturation, driving water past the repellent layer, and down to where the living roots are waiting. And then, the part that stops the relapse: you mulch. Once that soil is deeply, properly wet all the way through, you lay a 2 to 3 inch layer of organic mulch, compost, bark, well-rotted leaves over the whole area, keeping it a couple of inches back from the stem itself. That mulch is what keeps the soil from ever drying to that bone-dry repellent point again. It holds the moisture in, it keeps the surface from baking into a waxy crust, and it means the next time you water, the water actually stays. That's the difference between a plant that recovers for a week and a plant that recovers for good. So let's put the whole diagnosis together, because you can walk out to your plant right now and run through it in 5 minutes. You look at the symptoms: drooping, crisping, wilting worst in the afternoon, yellowing creeping up from the bottom. You've been watering and it's not helping. First, you rule out root rot, and you rule it out by smell and by touch. No sour swamp smell, no soggy standing wetness, no mushy brown roots. Good, that's not your problem. Then you find the real clue. You pour a slow cup of water and you watch where it goes. It runs down the sides of the pot and out the bottom. Or it beads and rolls off the surface of the bed. That's water repellency. That's the loop. Then you confirm it. You push a chopstick down into the core and pull it out dry as flour. Now you know the heart of your plant is parched, even though everything you've done says it should be soaked. And then you fix it, not with more of the same watering that's been failing, but with a true, deep, full re-wetting. The plunge for a pot, the fork, the drop of washing up liquid, and the slow, repeated soak for a plant in the ground. And you lock it in with mulch so it never slides back. That's it. That's the whole secret. And it works on almost anything you grow, because hydrophobic soil doesn't care whether it's holding a rose, a hosta, a hydrangea, a fern, a fuchsia, or a tomato. Dry soil that repels water behaves the same way under all of them. That's why this one trick really does work, again and again, across your whole garden. I think about how close I came to composting that 6-year-old plant. I had the shovel out, I decided it was over, that I'd done everything, and it just wasn't meant to be. And the truth was, I'd never once given it a proper drink. The answer wasn't more effort or more money or some product. It was understanding what my plant was actually telling me, and then doing the one simple thing that let the water finally get home. That's the feeling I want to hand to you. Not fear, not the panic of watching something you love fade while you guess, but The calm of being able to walk up to any struggling plant, read the signs, and actually know what it needs. You are not someone who loses plants, you are someone who learns to listen to them. And a gardener who can read thirst from repellency, who can tell a dry core from a drowned root, who knows the plunge that the old growers never forgot, does not stand there helpless anymore. So here's what I want you to do for me. Go out to the plant that's worrying you and run the chopstick test right into the middle of the root ball and come back and tell me what it looked like when you pulled it out. Was it dry as flour all the way down? Was it damp only at the very top? That one detail tells the whole story, and I read every comment. So tell me exactly what you found. And tell me where in the world you're gardening from, because a dry out in Arizona and a dry out in Yorkshire are two different beasts. And I love knowing who I'm talking to. If reading your plants instead of guessing at them is the kind of gardener you want to be, then come stand with the rest of us who garden that way. That's what subscribing here really means. It's a room full of people who'd rather understand their plant than panic over it. And next time, I'm going to show you a symptom that fools even experienced growers: leaves that turn yellow between the veins while the veins themselves stay stubbornly green, because that particular pattern is not a watering problem at all, and misreading it will cost you a whole season of blooms. I'll show you exactly what it means and the one thing that reverses it: bring your plant. We'll diagnose that one together too. I'm Mary, and if you're still here with me, you're my kind of gardener. Inside the Blooming Garden Circle, I walk you through the full rescue protocol, picking up right where we just stopped. You can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself. You'll belong among gardeners just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time with one click. Now that you can bring a struggling plant back, let me show you the one thing your clematis needs every July. Even a clematis you thought was gone can bloom again. It's starting right here.